This is Interview Connections TV, the #1 web TV show for podcasters and great guests. And I am Jessica Rhodes. I am your host, and I am committed to helping you deliver valuable, actionable content, grow your following, and build your business. And this week's episode is going to be in response to a question and a request for support and information that I've been getting from some of my clients and some of my friends in the online business space. And with this growth of more podcasts getting online, more people being interviewed, there's a number of entrepreneurs and experts that I work with personally that know a ton about what they're talking about. They're definitely experts, but maybe they're a little introverted, or they've never been interviewed before, and it can be a little bit nerve-wracking when you do your first podcast interview. So there might be some people watching here who have done a ton of interviews, are extroverts, and have no problem hopping on a Skype call with someone they've never met and just rocking the mic. This episode probably isn't for you, but I think that it will still be helpful regardless. So if you are someone that gets a little bit nervous doing a podcast interview, you're just getting started with it, I want to give you a couple of tips on how to get more comfortable with doing interviews and kind of what the road looks like and getting more exposure in this way. In my first podcast interview, I was very nervous, and I'm someone that, I went door to door for 6 years. I have no problem, walking up to a stranger and talking to them. But still, it was nerve-wracking because, A, it was someone I didn't know, and B, there were going to be people listening to this conversation, so I totally get that. It's kind of scary to put yourself out there like that. Maybe they ask you a question and you don't know the answer, which happened to me on that interview. Who asked me a question, and quite frankly, I couldn't understand what he was saying, and I didn't want to sound like an idiot, but anyway, it was not the best interview, but that's why it was my first. Your first interview is not going to be that great, and that's important to know. But really, I've done probably over a dozen interviews at this point, and my biggest piece of advice is that you just have to start and you just have to get practice, because it gets easier. Every interview you do gets better. You kind of get your stories down. I work with my clients at Interview Connections, and I help them be great guests. And one of the things you have to do to be a great guest is kind of have great stories to tell, so you can engage the host and engage the audience. You have to have really actionable, valuable content, so you can't just be kind of wishy-washy with big quotes and everything. You have to have really great content to share. So prepare questions for the host. Even if they don't use them, it's going to help you prepare for your interviews if you prepare questions about your expertise. So prepare 10 different questions, all different things that the host could ask you, and actually type out your answers. Word for word, get in a Word document and actually type out exactly what you would say if you were to answer that question in a podcast, and then practice. So that way you're not flustered, or you don't forget what you're supposed to say when they ask you that question. So that, #1, is a really great thing to do, just to practice. And the more interviews you do, the better you'll get. I also would recommend actually going back and listening to your interviews. It's kind of weird the first few times to hear your own voice in a recording, but you get used to it. And it does help, because you'll hear, oh, I really rambled on in that answer. I gotta shorten that up. Or, oh, that didn't really make much sense. It made sense in my head, but it didn't on the interview. So listen to your interviews. Give yourself critique. Work with a business coach who can help you as well. Probably most business coaches have been interviewed before if they're successful, I think. Not to say that if you're never been interviewed, you're not successful, but business coaches can help you when you're speaking and when you're being interviewed. So work with your coach, practice with him or her. And again, the more you do it, the more comfortable you'll get. And then one last thing, you can also request a pre-interview chat. I know that a lot of podcasters and radio show hosts will actually initiate this call. That's just standard protocol for their business, or for their podcast rather. They will say, let's get on the phone a week before the interview, just to kind of get out the small talk and get our the way we speak kind of in line with each other. So I think that's a good practice. If the host doesn't initiate that, most are going to be willing if you just say, hey, can we get on the phone really quickly? And I just want to make sure I understand the types of questions you're going to ask. So that's another great thing to do. So I hope that helps. Don't be nervous. Just get out there, do interviews, really just start. You just have to take action. You have to get yourself out of your comfort zone if you're going to grow. If you want to work with me, I have helped, tons of guests get interviewed. I know how to help you, position yourself as a celebrity and get comfortable. You can learn more at interviewconnections.com. Just click Be a Guest Expert at the top. I have a bunch of different programs where I run monthly coaching calls. I'd love to work with you as well. If you don't have an interview one sheet, I have a free template at my website. Any of my opt-in boxes, interviewconnections.com, or my blog at entrepreneursupportservices.com. Just put in your name and email and download that free template along with some ebooks and reports. Be sure to tune in next week for another episode of Interview Connections TV. Thank you so much for watching. Please share and like this video if you have friends or colleagues who would value from the information. Have a great, productive week. Do a lot of interviews and deliver valuable, actionable content. I am Jessica Rhodes, your host. Thank you so much for watching.